bad
twice
rupture.
to make sure I didn't.
That's for a Model 94 though, right? A lever gun?
Because you know, that memory blocks.
I feel like
It came in levers. Savage had them for a while.
What's the lever? Felt like it was only a few months and then we moved it.
Yeah, make a 370.
But yeah, that reflex.
Yep, yep,
Every day.
yep, muscle memory.
You're thinking,
375 Winchester.
oh, there's a bunch of them.
Yeah.
Or what's the
There's
other
a
one? 409.
307 Express,
I don't.
Yeah, but Winchester in lever guns.
348 is their. The 348 is very powerful.
I don't quite understand how they can keep that thing together in
Oh, there we are.
bolt locks. Up. It's good.
That's a famous on YouTube. Deb.
Like an elephant gun.
It's a great bear rifle.
I've been reading a lot on 350.
Well, that 338, elk hunters like that one.
I know, you shot one?
Yeah.
You won't like it.
No,
I'm telling you, they hit you.
saying how mild they are.
No, that's a 375 H&H is better than a 330.
338. At least, well, everything barks me, but you wouldn't want to. You'd want to be pretty well dialed in before you took that to the range. You know, you don't want to shoot F-50.
So I got from my father-in-law 300 Weatherby Mark 5. Nice gun. Barrel's rusted, a little bit on the tip. He was in like the basement.
Yeah.
So I've been thinking about with Weatherby won't let you just cut the barrel. It'll throw the ballistics. I'm going to put a muzzle brake on it. Have you ever shot one of them? They're stupid. And but I've been thinking about a friend of mine said, look at the 257 one. Send it up.
Oh, it looks like Beth Kruger is joined remotely.
I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Kruger from the Black.
Is that the action you want to go?
Oh, not really, but it's father-in-law's gun. He's
Yeah.
JJ, huh?
I just.
Have you seen
just leave
JJ?
it as is. Don't really shoot.
I wouldn't mess with them.
I haven't either.
And I ain't real
A
worried
little
about
rust
that.
isn't a big.
Yeah. But
You can get it re-blued.
he's got a Weatherby scope on it. I don't know, 860.
Hey, Steve, yeah. What I started to think about the older I get is you read about the recoil does to your eyes.
Rise? Yeah. Maybe that's my problem.
It's amazing. Well, it's hard on that thing stretch.
I've actually thought about that because, you know, I got a disability for my hearing from the artillery. You think about standing behind those howitzers,
Yeah.
banging
Concussion.
away, the concussion. We never thought about our eyes.
Yeah. Well, recoil is what gets your eyes.
I tell you though, I got a 270 and a Model 70 featherweight. And that ain't real light. That thing jacks.
What?
I got 270 and a Model 70 featherweight.
Well, them featherweights,
This.
what do they weigh?
Yeah.
6.3 pounds. Put a scope on them, they might weigh 7.
Yeah.
It's a pretty light gun.
Really?
It makes a heck of a difference. 7-pound gun to a 8.5.
I have a Ruger guide gun, which is made for the 416.
Yeah.
It's a 20-inch barrel with a brake on the end of the 20. But the gun is 9 pounds. I just love it. I shoot an 06, it's like shooting. I take the brake off when I hunt because my ears, I read stories, you guys put the decibel meter out there, you know,
Yeah.
brake for the shooter, it's not bad, but for the guy out there, absolutely. Definitely. That's what the guys need.
I got a Tony JR, the boss.
Morning, Jay.
Okay, it is 10 o'clock.
I shot it out of my.
Morning.
10 o'clock, folks.
Yeah.
Hi, JJ.
Hi,
No palm tree today?
right here.
Okay, there we go. Okay,
Keeping an eye on the sidewalk.
Pine County, if you haven't caught on, Pine County Commissioner JJ Waltham is attending a county board meeting via interactive technology. He's not down the road in Sandstone. He was, but he is doing this in pursuant to Minnesota statute 13D-02. And he will be able to be heard and seen at all times, and he is in Puerto Rico. Public is invited to join this meeting remotely, and we do have several people dialed in, and we're happy to have you on board. With that being said, we'll call the meeting to order and we'll rise for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
For which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. It is public forum time. If anybody wishes to speak in public forum, now is your opportunity.
Steve, it's Gussie.
Yes, Gussie.
I was just wondering if there was any, I looked at the earlier January meeting and I realized that you had approved the search for new voting machines. And I just want to repeat that I'd like to make sure that Dominion and Sequoia are not part of that because of the controversy surrounding the fraud with them. So just repeating that request. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else for public forum? If not, any additions or corrections to the agenda?
No additions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We'll look for
Why
approval.
don't we go move the agenda?
Thank you.
Lovegren will second.
Got a motion by Ludwig, second by Lovegren to approve the agenda as submitted. Any discussion? If not, Debbie, you want to call the roll?
District 2, Commissioner Moore.
Aye.
District 3, Commissioner Lovegren. Aye. District 4, Commissioner Waldham.
Yes.
District 5, Commissioner Ludwig.
Aye.
1 Chair Holland.
Yes.
Thank you.
We'll move on to the minutes of the January 4th organization and regular county board meeting and summary for publication, and the minutes of the January 11th special joint meeting, Pine County Commissioners and Pine County HRA and Economic Development Authority.
I'll make a
And the
motion.
minutes of January 12th special meeting, Committee of the Whole for Strategic Planning.
I'll make a motion. Accept the minutes.
I'll second.
A motion by Lovegren, seconded by Moore. Any discussion? If not, Debbie, you want to call the roll?
District 3, Commissioner Lovegren. Aye. District 4, Commissioner Waldham.
Yes.
District 5, Commissioner Ludwig.
Aye.
District 1, Chair Holland.
Yes.
District 2, Commissioner Moore.
Aye.
Thank you.
And then minutes and boards, reports and correspondence. There's a Department of Human Services correspondence from January 4th. We need approval for that we have received it.
I'll move that.
A second.
Motion by Moore, seconded by Lovegren. Any discussion? If not, Debbie?
District 4, Commissioner Waldham.
Yes.
District 5, Commissioner Ludwig.
Aye.
District 1, Chair Holland.
Yes.
District 2, Commissioner Moore.
Aye.
District 3, Commissioner Lovegren. Aye. Thank you.
So move on to the consent agenda. You've had that in front of you for several days.
Why don't we go move?
I'll second.
Motion by Ludwig, seconded by Moore to approve the consent agenda as submitted. Any discussion? If not, Debbie?
District 5, Commissioner Ludwig.
Aye.
District 1, Chair Holland.
Yes.
District 2, Commissioner Moore.
Aye.
District 3, Commissioner Lovegren. District 4, Commissioner Waldham.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, that moves us to exciting part. We will introduce our new Veteran Service Officer who just got sworn in a few minutes ago, Michael Harshman. So welcome to Pine County.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chair, members of the board. My name is Becky Foss. I'm the Director of Pine County Health and Human Services, also advocate extraordinaire for the VSO department. I'm happy to be here today, and it's a joy to introduce you to Mike Harshman. He is the new VSO with Pine County, and he's been with us for a little over a month. And excited to have him here. We do have our eyes on the prize, reaching out to more veterans and really getting them involved in the VSO department, ensuring that they have access to services that they deserve, that they're entitled to. And Mike is part of that plan, as is Mindy, who's been doing great work for the VSO department for years. Mike's interview was phenomenal. And one of the things that stood out to me and to the interview panel was just his passion for serving veterans, his empathy for the work. And I just think he's going to do great things for Pine County veterans. Without any further ado, there you go.
Well, thank you, Mrs. Foss. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. I couldn't be more humble and proud to have this job. Everyone I've met so far has been great, and the passion of the community has just been phenomenal. I look forward to working hard today to help our veterans and their families in this community. I'm a father, a two-tour combat vet myself. I was in the Navy, and I'm just looking forward to getting out there and just trying to make a difference in one way or another every day. Thank you.
Welcome aboard, and thank you for serving our country.
It's my honor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you, Mike.
Mindy just reiterated this morning, we've got 2,350 or so vets in Pine County. She deals directly with about 700 and some of those. And so we've got some other people that we need to reach. So that's why that's why we brought you on board. And we hear great things about you. So we expect great things from you.
Like I said, I couldn't be any more humble and proud to have this position.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So do you think it's the not all the veterans come, or they're just too proud to ask for help?
I'll tell you what, I believe in this program, not just because I've seen it work. It's worked for me. I know how hard it is to walk through those doors and say, I need help.
Yeah.
It's impossible sometimes to fathom saying that, especially if you're a combat vet and all that. You have that sort of ego about you. You have that, hey, I can do this. I can do this on my own. And sometimes that's just not the case. So walking through those doors is a hard thing to do. And maybe, just having a little bit more of us and getting out there, we're going to draw in more people.
Well, if you ever come across something where you think the board can help, I think we'd be more than happy to figure out a way to help you.
I walk into this position where if I have a question, I will always be the first one to raise my hand. Like, I don't know what I'm doing here. And Mindy, of course, is my go-to. And then from there, absolutely. If there was anything that y'all could do to help and that me and her could think of, we would not hesitate to ask.
Thank you.
Like I said, I couldn't be any more astonished and happy and excited that there's so much support that y'all give us and the community gives us. And that's going to bring in more people. As soon as I see that there is that commitment from, not only the county, but the community itself, it's going to get a lot more people through the door.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mindy.
Thanks, guys.
We'll move on to the Facilities Committee report.
You want to take that, JJ?
Well, I could have to find it on the laptop here unless you could do it, Matt, if you got it closer in front of you.
I certainly will take it.
Hey, thank you, Matt.
You bet, no problem. We had our meeting on January 5th, and it was pretty much a standard meeting. Lots of discussion. We're trying to keep our buildings and things working. And I'm sure you read some of that in the minutes. But the main point to talk about today is the conference room that's being constructed at the new courthouse. And the Facilities Committee had a discussion in there, and we put forward to name that room after Commissioner Steve Chafee when it's finished, like we named these rooms up. So with that, I would like to make a motion to do that.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. We have a motion by Ludwig, seconded by Lovegren to name the under construction conference room at the courthouse in Pine City after former Commissioner Steve Chafee. We've done that in the past. We're sitting in a room right now that's named after
Doug Carlson.
Doug Carlson, and the one right behind us is the John Wright room. So I think it's a good tradition we've started. So
Yeah, I did too.
any,
Steve was a commissioner for a long time.
yep. Any other questions, concerns? If not, Debbie, you want to call the roll?
District 1, Chair Holland.
Yes.
District 2, Commissioner Moore.
Aye.
District 3, Commissioner Lovegren. District 4, Commissioner Waldham.
Yes.
District 5, Commissioner Ludwig.
Aye.
Thank you.
Any other items?
Not really. There's also just a lot of discussion about, it's just detailed minutia stuff.
Yep.
Stuff we're working on. Nothing really to.
Okay, thank you. Personnel
Thanks,
committee.
Matt.
Yep,
Yep.
personnel committee report.
You want me to do that or? All right, we met January 10th and the Personnel Committee made the following recommendations. Health and Human Services acknowledge the retirement eligibility worker Judith Tengwall effective March 31st, 2022, and approve the backfill of the position and any subsequent vacancies that may occur due to internal promotion or lateral transfer. And in administration, consider resolution 2022-03, setting the 2022 minimum annual salary for county attorney at 80,000 and county sheriff at 77,000, and authorize board chair and county administrator to sign. And that was it. I will move that, both of them.
I will second.
Got a motion by Ludwig or by Moore, seconded by Ludwig to approve the personnel committee report as printed. Any discussion? If not, Debbie, you want to call the roll?
District 2, Commissioner Moore.
Aye.
District 3, Commissioner Lovegren. Aye. District 4, Commissioner Waldham.
Yes.
District 5, Commissioner Ludwig.
Aye.
District 1, Chair Holland.
Yes.
Thank you.
And that brings us to something I've been waiting for a while, is excuse me, were you done?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
A report from Hometown Town Fiber. Kyle lead on this, or who is the lead? I'm not sure, but anyway, your team can, we're excited.
I get to go first.
We have a lot of time, folks.
Okay, so we don't have,
So just so you know, where Pine County, you've heard this, I'm sure, from Leslie and others. Pine County is even though we've been at the bottom of the barrel, it's not because we have not been concerned. And it has risen to the top of our list a couple of years in a row, things that we need to solve. I think we're making progress for the first time in the history of me being on this board. We've started to see some things happening. So we're very excited to hear your report. Thank you.
we're really excited to be here as well. So thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board and Administrator Menke and the fabulous one back there. I tell you, she is something else to work with. And even when she's holding my feet to the fire, she's really kind about it. So we're gonna first just start with, you're gonna run that for me, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
We're gonna start with just making sure the words we use have the same meaning.
Okay,
So we're going to go through just some basic broadband technology. We're going to talk a little bit about the challenges that the industry faces and why we think that's the case. We'll go over our work, and then we'll get to the fun part, which is the field study findings. And then we'll talk about recommendations, priorities, next steps, and your thoughts. But of course, your thoughts can come in at any time. If I start to talk too fast, please say slow down. My father always reminds me that I have a tendency to get going. So a quick overview of broadband. We'll start with wireless category. Fixed wireless, which you have some in Pine County. The max speed, and I won't read all this to you, but the max is 100 down and 50 up, and things like snow and trees and wind and hills all interrupt that service. The interesting one we often hear, well, 5G is going to solve our problems. 5G's max, well, its minimum is about 100 megs. Its max is about a gig. And unless you are in direct line of sight of the tower and you are with 1,000 feet of it, you don't get that 1 gig service.
1,000 feet, that's a quarter of a mile? That's,
Yeah.
When Kyle has been up here in the field, he'll say, wait a minute, I've got to drive to the cell site to have this conversation. So he finds the site, and that's how we've been able to conduct business back and forth. But I had no idea until this one said to me, well, and I live in Minneapolis and I have 5G, but I don't have 5G. And Kyle said, no, if you are not within a direct line of sight of the tower or an end within 1,000 feet, your peak speed is going to be 100, not a gigabyte.
Or somewhere between there.
Or somewhere between,
Yeah.
somewhere between there. So, and I said, well, why are the self-providers? I mean, every single advertisement on TV is all about 5G. And I'm going to read this, so I'm sure to get it right. Right now, the tower's 4G can support 100,000 devices. So that's your phones, your everything else on the Internet of Things. So the 4G system can support 100,000 devices. The 5G system can support 1 million in that same space. So it's really good for the cell phone companies because they can do so much more with what they have, but it's not that exciting for the rest of us unless you're right next to it. Another type of wireless is satellite. You can do this on. So there's 2 kinds of satellites, as you know. The geosynchronous, as I call the traditional satellite, and that's what you have here with people experiencing the delays and such. The other one is the low Earth orbit satellite, and the industry calls the LEO. The delay with the LEO is more acceptable than it is with the GEO. The challenge with the LEOs and with the Starlink that is available now is that you have 9 minutes of service. And then you have to wait for the next satellite. You have 9 minutes of service. You have to wait.
They're not really waiting. They're just putting more and more satellites in service so that it's continuous. Each one goes by the horizon in roughly 9 minutes. So.
And they have 1,800 launched now, and they need, I think you said 12,000, 10 to 12,000.
Their goal is 12,000.
12,000 to make it continuous for people. So we'll go on to wired. The DSL, that's your phone lines that most of Pine County has. You'll also hear this category called wireline, as well as wire. Some people today are fine. It all depends on how close they are to the technology and what kind of technology they have. Others, you can be saying, I have the same service as my friends down the road, but mine is awful and theirs is great. Yeah, it's true. You're paying the same thing, but you're getting very different service depending on where you're located. Cable, the cable TV, coaxial cable service is in limited areas of the county, which you already know, where there's more population. We get into fiber, and we put fiber in two different buckets. We put it in what we call the shared fiber optics, and that's what the industry is putting in a lot of now. It will, I think when you were installing it, I don't know how many times, 600 and some you split it.
Yeah.
But usually that one fiber line is split between 16 times and 256 times these days. And that one split serves a house or a property.
The most common split is some denomination of 32 times. And after that, the industry has found that it starts to get a little unreliable or problematic. So the 256 stuff has been back way down or way back to 32 times. But it's like if you imagine the old party line phone systems where you pick up and your neighbor's on there. It's not that traffic is crossing, but it is a shared path.
You're showing how old you are. Party line phones. And then the other category we call is directly connected fiber. And that's really the ultimate goal for everyone. It's been used forever for large businesses and government, military. But it will last forever. It has the capacity to serve. We estimate 20 some years. When you install it right, there is no maintenance. There's no digging up the streets every 5 years to improve it. And we believe this is the way to solve the ongoing government subsidies and the internet constant updates and never having what you need, always being behind. So the challenges we've identified, we put them in 3 buckets because I like buckets. Government standards, the ISP's business model, and finally the technology they use. Government standards, they have great intentions. They are helpful, but they only focus on speed. And if you can't get the service, speed doesn't matter to you. We strongly believe that anything that is done moving forward needs to address reliability and choice and affordability. And if we don't address those 3 things, we're going to just keep redoing this over and over and over again.
Is it easy to upgrade speed once you have it in place?
Depends on if you have the directly connected fiber. It is if you have the right equipment, right technology. Am I right?
Yeah. When we get to the recommendations section, we'll talk a little bit about how we're weighting the recommendations by longevity. So that's a piece we take careful look at.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
The ISP business models, and we're not here to trash them. We're really empathetic with how they have to work and how they've had to work. We have people in our company who grew up in CenturyLink, and they've been working like crazy to try to keep systems running. But when the goal is ROI, and that's what you have to work under, you end up building things fast. You ended up, building things cheap. That's part of the reason he left the install business he was in, because he didn't want to work that way. And then that leads to the ongoing maintenance costs and your customers being unhappy. And the worst thing for me is it creates a lot of haves and have-nots. And that just doesn't, well, now we know with the pandemic, that's not fair. It's not, you can't live like that. And unfortunately, the pandemic showed us that with with what happened to so many families. So the have and have not under that ROI model is one of the biggest challenges. And the last part was the technology that has been used. You know, it was made to transfer to talk on phones. It was made before broadband was even a service. You have to use the right tool for the right job. Is that how? And that's today it's fiber. And before 2013, putting fiber to homes was just way too expensive. But in 2013, a company did some magical things and the price came down in enough of a way that people can actually, that it's actually possible to do it for residential purposes. So our goal, so all that's been done so far, we feel just kicks the can down the road. And what we want you to do, we want to help you stop kicking. We want you to help you fix it the best you can for the longest term you can. It won't be equal. Our recommendations are not equal across the county. But they're practical and they're prioritized based on what you have and a goal to solve the problem for a long time. So you hired us a few months back. I know Leslie would be really happy if it would go faster, but the field work, there's a lot of stuff in the field that had to be photoed and identified, and there's that we had to look at. So here's what you hired us to do, document the goals and priorities and conduct the field study. So we know what to do. We're bringing you prioritized actionable items. We did have some early findings that we provided to Leslie for the broadband community group. So we shared that information. We also shared some township by township detail early on, Leslie. We're working through financing scenarios with our partners with Ehlers and the grant programs that helping develop a grant program for the county that includes accountability. Because one of the complaints that in the survey and elsewhere is, you know, they just put it in. I saw them put it in just a few years ago, and I still don't have decent service when the half money and the things from the federal government change. And this time with the money that communities are getting, we got to make sure it's done right. And so we have some ideas on how to include accountability into the grant program. Now you get Kyle and the stuff, and we.
Oh, this is the interactive map.
This is you.
Okay,
One more, I think. We have a
so,
blank screen.
so we, yeah. Well, you.
I don't want to touch it.
We went through the whole county, drove every road and looked at every piece of technology that's in the field and mapped it. And the reason we did that was because overall, the broadband maps that are generated aren't 100% accurate, right? Or even not even close to that. And they're not really, there's several reasons for that. One of them is that they're delayed by time, right? So there's a lot of construction going on and different things happening. The maps get updated sometime, years later or whatever it might be. There's no standard for mapping, right? There's no format that everybody has to follow. There's no accountability to it. They just take what everybody says and puts it up. And so what we find are a lot of little discrepancies here and there. It's not a major problem in the discrepancies, but it's how that's interpreted that becomes an issue. So you may look at a census block that says you have this great service, and technically that may be true. It might be in the ground somewhere, but you're not able to buy it, right? You can't actually get it. And so we started to figure out like why that is occurring or what's going on. And the only way we can get to a solid foundational work off of and give recommendations to was to do the mapping. So that's the long version of why we did this extensive step. So the properties that we rate as best, we highlight here in blue. You probably didn't notice much of a change. These are areas where there's directly connected fiber optics serving businesses or buildings. So there's a few of those in the more populated areas. I'm going to start with the best and work my way to the worst. So we rate the next one as better. And these in yellow are represented by areas that have fiber optic internet to the home or to the business that's in that PON category that is a shared fiber optic service. So there's some of that around that's actually you can buy today. We used a combination of techniques to figure that out. One was we needed to physically see the infrastructure in the field, and then we needed to make sure on the different maps that are provided publicly that a person could indeed buy it. So there may be services that are going to be hotted up soon or are in service now that may not be on this map yet, but they'd be a small percentage because maybe the broadband company didn't get the information out that they can provide that service. So there's some of it where we saw the infrastructure, but I believe you couldn't order it. The next one is good, and this generally represents the cable modem services and the cable television services, or some version of fiber optically backed coaxial cable. And again, it's pretty much around populated areas, around some lakes, and follows that 35 corridor pretty tightly. The next, yes, sir.
Did that translate to a number of households or
Yeah, we have that data.
okay.
Yeah. We have a little bit later on, I'll zoom in and show you how we extrapolated the numbers. The next one, we put it in the purple category. These are what we consider bad or bad service, meaning you can actually get the service to your home, but it's not meeting the market demand, right? Market demand is greater than what the technology can support. There may or may not be reliability issues in these areas. There could be wide varying services levels depending on the quality of the line that's in front of your property. This is basically DSL service using phone lines. There's a lot of fiber optic cable out in there, which we'll talk about in a minute. And these are all fiber backed DSL circuits, but even with that picture, it doesn't meet today's market demand for broadband in an overwhelming majority of the cases. You may have a few people in this category that will say it works, it's fine, it's meeting my needs, but that's going to be a short-lived phenomenon. So the next layer is the worst property, and we have that in red. The folks that are in these properties are too far away from the fiber optic backed DSL service to get what we would consider wireless or reliable service that meets market demand. It's very subpar, if at all, reliable or available. So some people in the red areas are going to have a really difficult time getting service, and they may even be switching over to alternate services besides wireline. Like in these areas, you see antennas on homes. People are doing terrestrial wireless. See a lot of satellite systems for the satellite internet. I've seen some homes have cellular antennas pointing at cellular towers to try to get some sort of bandwidth in, but the folks in this area are the ones that are experiencing the worst of the broadband issue on the red. I'm gonna shut these off for just a second if you bear with me. We have another one called PON stat. And this is getting into some of the analytics of the data that we've grabbed. We have a little bit more analytics to do down around the Pine City area. So we feel that there's going to be a few more of these areas that'll pop up as we through the rest of these pins because we're going through them one by one. But this section represents areas where an ISP put in fiber optic cable to serve a different need than fiber to the home. So a lot of these routes are fiber optic cable that went past people's homes that served, we call them DSLAMs, but it's the DSL, fiber back DSL service. It might go to a cell tower, or it might be connecting towns together from one central office to another, have some other purpose in the ISP. But they were forward thinking enough to build it, and they put the infrastructure in so that it could be in a future date set up for fiber to the home service. So as we were doing our field study, we found these little pockets of architecture where they've got about 50% there already done for other reasons, but there's adequate count and adequate bandwidth and adequate opportunity there. They're not going to organically do that because there's not enough population density to justify it, but it is an opportunity as from the county perspective or from the public perspective to say, we can go in here and put a little bit of incentive to get them to put in the switch gear and the infrastructure to make that happen. And we have some recommendations along those lines. And so that is kind of the rating. We use several factors when we weight the rating. One of them is, of course, market demand. Where's the need? And that's outside of the government goals. That's just kind of what people are needing to function, right? And then we project that out. And so when we talk about time, we weight that pretty heavily over time on what technology is going to support, how many years out, and then how best to use your funds, right? Based on. Okay. So let's talk about these field items for a second. And I'll start with I think I'll start with, what do you think, Eileen, the copper or the?
No, show the fiber.
Show the fiber first? Okay.
This is
So.
This is why poor Leslie's waiting so extra long to get to get the
Go.
results.
I think this is the first map we showed you, right, Leslie? The fiber. You're like, no way. Well, yeah, way. Yeah, so. Now, it's important to understand that just like any type of architecture, if you put fiber optics in it, doesn't necessarily mean that you can just hook up to your home with it, because it's being used for a lot of different things. The good news is that it carries an enormous amount of bandwidth, and you can peel off of some of these lines and establish areas of service with some incentivization. But here, so this is all the fiber in Pine County right now. And what these represent are pedestals or markers or handholds or something that gave us indication that there is actually fiber optic cable there and running. So this has been put in, it's operating by several different companies for several different reasons. The good news is that as we start looking at your wireless strategies and some of your other getting fiber out to the areas that are in red, you can start to see that it's not going to be incredibly cost prohibitive to do because there's enough bandwidth in key areas to do it. So I'm going to overlay.
Is that map in our handouts or not?
No, I don't think so.
So the line, give me a reference. There's Highway 48 out of Hinckley.
Mm-hmm.
And is that the Sandstone Road going east? Is that?
There's 30 there, yeah.
There's 30.
I believe this is 23 running up through Ascot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we. What's that?
Click on.
Oh, you want me to zoom in and click a pin?
I'll just show them what's.
So one of the things that we did, if we go into Sandstone here, we can look at these pins. I'll just pick one here. And got to get to the right layer. But we took, this is a picture of the inside of the truck apparently, but we took pictures. Here's a fiber ped and fiber post and some peds. And we did that for every one of these pins. It's we wanted to find out owner, condition, location, things like that. So we were looking for more information than just where. We were looking for all sorts of different info. So our technicians, doesn't mean much to you. You see this stuff in the field all the time, but our technician goes, oh, that's a 502 case with a, whatever. So, yeah.
They just put that on.
There are reasons why we're doing that, but anyway, we have interactive maps as part of our deliverable for you. And we're going to coordinate with your staff on, we'll coordinate with your staff on the GIS layers and how that's distributed.
Away from Sandstone.
That's interesting.
Now you have, I'm going to overlay some things so you can start, when you start doing the analytics of the data, we'll just take the worst properties and turn them on.
Ask you a question on that first.
Yeah.
Going up Highway 23, why is there that gap?
Right there.
Why, if you've got fiber there, why would there be?
Yeah, it's possible that we drove by some PEDs and didn't see them in the weeds or something, but
Okay,
and fiber can go
yeah, there is.
many, many miles without repeating.
Okay,
So if there's nothing there, they'll just put a plow down and go.
okay,
That's not an uncommon thing to
Okay.
see that. So it could be, I'm not saying we did this perfectly 100%, because we're human and
right.
we had a lot of trucks in the field and a lot of people doing this. So there's human error that could be there too. But the reality is that we know that there's links between those two areas on 23. But yeah, I see what you're saying about the gap.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
So there should be something between every dot, kind of.
Oh, there is, yeah. Those links are there. Just we didn't see a marker or we didn't identify a marker. Whoops, I'm getting a little crazy with the zooming. But there would not be a gap in those connectivity lines between those towns. And we even know that too, because there's some loops and stuff that go around for different reasons. But when you lay over the fiber routes and the underserved areas or the worst areas served, you can see there's a lot of fiber. And this is kind of what your citizens were saying in the reports and some of the feedback we get. It's like, hey, it was just put in, it's by my house. I saw them put it in. How come? What's going on? So this is kind of what you're seeing there. The good news there is that that's bandwidth that's available to those areas, those geographic areas where this fiber is. And we can work with those providers to get that out to the home.
That's my question.
Yeah, question.
That your mark right there is accessible to the public. It's not.
What's that?
It's all accessible to the public.
It has to be up, it has to be turned into a service that's sellable to.
Right, but I mean, it's not something that's dedicated to the government or some other. There's a lot of.
There's a lot of stuff running on there, but there's also capacity in there, right? So the way.
I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, were you able to identify the aerial fiber in areas also?
Yes.
Okay, like transmission lines out east of Sandstone.
Yes.
Along the highway. Okay.
We found a little bit of the power company fiber, I believe, right by their substation here in Sandstone.
Yeah, it runs on that. Yeah, it runs on the High Line actually from the metro right through our entire county on that line.
Right.
All the way up to Duluth, Minnesota.
Minnesota Power. Yeah, and we did find a lot of that aerial fiber that was used by a lot of different companies. You got MediaCom doing some of that. You have SCI Broadband, Minnesota Power.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. So, yeah, we weren't just looking in the ground. We can see it in the. Anyway, let's see. I'm gonna shut that off, and then we'll just go through some of this. Shut the fiber off. Then you look at the coaxial layers. Part of our recommendation set in these areas is that coax cable is an older technology. It's not as old as the telephone services, right? But in the 80s when they were putting phone or TV, it was designed for television distribution. Coax cable has a lot of bandwidth capacity on it. It's a good medium for the market demand today. And we expect it'll hold market demand for at least 5 to 10 years. And it's in populated and densely populated areas that have a really high probability of organically upgrading because the density is there to support the market. So subsidies in these areas, you know, pretty low on the list when you look at the overall county need. So, but that can be represented pretty quickly by the coaxial layer. Copper layer, these are all like the fiber pins that we had. We found all of, you know, a lot of copper pedestals. And that's just all the telephone stuff. And then we have these dots are what we call D-slams. And that's where fiber optic cable goes out into the field and touches a device that turns that bandwidth into DSL service. And DSL service has to be fairly close to the users to operate. And so they have all of these pedestals put out there. And we identify those because those are good locations for upgrading fiber networks. There's power there, there's easement there, there's strategic infrastructure there. So those are good places to start looking around for opportunity, right?
If you looked at that, I live east of Pine City. And I happen to be at the end of the line for cable modem service, so I've been lucky. But you would think we would have pretty good service. We've got all these fiber back D-slams.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact of the matter is the people that live out there are the ones I hear some of the most complaints from.
That's correct.
Because unless they're just down the road from one of those pedestals, they still got that old copper and they're getting lousy.
Yep. And that, you know, the pandemic, as Eileen alluded to earlier, kind of, you know, there's like it's almost like a Moore's law effect, but there's a consistent march of more and more appetite for bandwidth that's been going on. When we hit the pandemic, it shot way up. And so the public started to feel this pain, and the ISPs and the telecommunication industry were suddenly way behind. And there's been areas of the country that have been behind for decades. It's nothing new here, right? But there's a lot of pressure on it now. And that has to do with what you're talking about, because the old DSL service was good when all you were doing is checking email once a day or something. But now you have to do a Zoom meeting to go to school, or there's medical issues or whatever, and you're doing interactive media. It just doesn't have the capacity to hold that. So all of those phone lines and all of the technology supported by that right now is behind market demand. And that's why you're getting all of these complaints and pressure. So we look at that market demand and that wait of time when we make our recommendations here. So, anything else, Eileen, that I'm missing or that you would like to show? Should we talk about the wireless stuff a little bit?
Sure.
Okay. So one of the things that we discovered, and I'm just going to show you let's see.
They know about it. We discovered.
Yeah.
You all know
We
what the
discovered.
zones are.
Yeah, we discovered it. So this is AT&T's coverage pattern. We got maps for all of them. Some of them load better than others, but it's pretty close to the other patterns too. So if you have Verizon, for example, it's going to be similar in the areas where there is no service. And as Eileen talked about earlier, when we were out doing our field work and had to have calls or something, we'd have to leave those areas and drive to a cell service or a cell site to be able to conduct business. But when you're out there, you know, we look at it not as a broadband issue, right? Because this kind of falls into that public safety bucket. So just so you know where the bad areas are. And I think we even talked a little bit about our recommendations moving toward out of the broadband bucket and into the public safety issue. But this helps determine where things can be. And then if you overlay that, if you were to yeah. Well, I was going to do, if you overlay this with the fiber map again, you can see there's opportunities to connect towers and put infrastructure out there without having to plow in a lot of fiber to get to the tower if you are strategic on where things are located. So it's helpful to know where these are when you're looking at that other problem as well.
Go back to just the cell phone coverage map.
Yep.
What is it? Is all the green, the light green, is that supposedly you could get good service there or what?
Yeah, that's what they're reporting as covered area for LTE or 4G service. So you should be able to at least make a phone call on those areas.
You can at least text, I think.
Right.
Right. You might not be able to call it because I know where one green is. I hunt out there.
Yeah.
Text only.
Yeah. So we have some areas, I think, you know.
So it's interesting because I can see the water tower from my farm in Pine City.
Mhm.
And I'm a terrible forester, but I think I am. So I got this little app that identifies trees, but it needs network service.
Right.
I can't on the back end of my farm, a half a mile. I mean, I'm not a mile from the water tower, a mile and a half. You can't make it work.
Right.
The end of my farm.
Yeah, it's frustrating. I mean,
Yeah.
people, the way we look at wireless is we say the convenience of wireless requires wires, right? I mean, you have to back that with something. And then there's limitations, as Eileen alluded to, in the different technologies and the different coverage patterns and things like that. So the more wireless towers and the more wireless services that are put up, the better that those holes get filled.
Trees. Put it out there.
Okay. So when we look at the cellular services, our recommendations fall into the not really using it as a primary bandwidth or broadband service, although you can in some cases, you know, like we found out people putting antennas on their homes and stuff, you can do that. But we were focused mainly on the wireline and the terrestrial wireless services. All right, I think that's probably the end of my map part. Eileen, do you want to? Any questions on the mapping before we get to some of the recommendations? Okay.
So you know what we're talking about, that you can't even make a cell phone call from places where you think you are not in the boondocks.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're from downtown Minneapolis, you
Now,
don't think you are, but if you're from Pine County, you know you're not in the middle. You're not in the middle of the Nemadji Forest. You're driving on a tarred county road.
Yeah.
And your phone won't work.
And imagine that from a sheriff responding to a call or somebody that's stranded somewhere that's trying to call. So both sides of the public safety spectrum are impacted by some of this. A lot of places where we go and look, all that fiber that's running through the key roads around your county are absent. And so that has to be added as well. And so one of the things that you have going for you when it comes to broadband and telecommunications services as a critical infrastructure is that there's a fair amount of it around the county that can be utilized. And that's good news because it does allow you to start developing areas that are higher priority for you.
Mr. Chair. So, I don't understand all this, but so we're a large county and we have distance issues, right? And we have terrain issues. So is it going to take a combination of things to solve that? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
It's terrain and distance.
Yeah.
And then sparsely population and return on investment too.
Correct. Right. And that's part of the reason why it hasn't what we call organically developed.
Yeah.
There's no financial incentive for somebody outside, let's say public safety, to do it, right? So it needs to be subsidized some way, shape, or form. So, but you'll notice if you go up the 35, follow 35, there's new sites and newer sites that have come online, and they're upgrading their services to the 5G cell service, and different coverage patterns are coming alive and different things. But it still doesn't help you with the terrain issues and the triangulation of service and things like that you need for it to be really reliable. So.
When you said it hasn't developed and it needs to be subsidized, just like power, electricity was, and just like phone, almost everybody had phone lines. I just built a brand new house this summer and we didn't run communication lines to it because it's not worth it.
Yeah.
You know, but back when it was, you know,
Right.
and I actually kind of tried fighting with CenturyLink to see, because we got fiber down the road. I'm like, what would it cost? Just shoot me a ballpark figure, what it would cost to shove it down here, this dirt road. He wouldn't even, it's not available. That's what he said.
Yeah.
You know, so.
We've had, we talked to a few people in Pine County and the answer was, you know, like to get the phone line for DSL service, they wanted, you know, several $1,000s to get to the nearest pedestal from your home.
Yeah.
Put it in. And as a homeowner, you're sitting there thinking, well, I might be willing to spend $2,000 or $3,000 to do it. Like if I'm building a new home or if there's some reason, if at the end of the day, I got something better than DSL service, right? If I got to the curb and I had fiber service or something that was reliable and met my market demand, you know, then it becomes a little bit different, right? So that's why we identified some of those areas where these are areas where people might need some help just with that cost to get to the curb. And then the ISP is gonna need a little.
I bet if they would have come back and said, Josh, it's gonna cost you $5,000 to put fiber to your house.
You could double that and I would have probably did
You
it.
would have. Went around with a clipboard to your neighbors and say, hey, you wanna go in here? If we all stick in 3,000, we can get it.
I got 3 kids at home right now trying to do distance learning with, on a cell jetpack and cell phones and whatever. So,
Leslie's there.
yeah, it's ridiculous. And they wanted $2,500 to run up to 25 megs to my house.
Right, I mean, that's the point.
Yeah.
You're okay spending 2,500, but at the end of the day, you get down there and you have DSL and it's like,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna do that, right?
Oh, well, it's working.
So we recognize that, and it's part of one of the things that we've been working with Leslie on is coming up with some ideas and things that spread your limited resources to the most people as we can. And you have to get creative and kind of think out of the box a little bit and apply that to the uniqueness of Pine County and the areas that are unique to your area. So you can't just take a blanket set of recommendations and say, well, here's a number 2 with a Coke, you know, and it fits everywhere. Well, when you go out and map it and you look, you start to find the nuances in that, and you can start to better utilize the funds. And that was our main objective for you, was to find out how best to utilize the limited dollars that are available.
Okay, keep going. You already did that part.
I already did this one,
Yep, you already did
and this one, I did that one, didn't I? Well, I'm way
Right
ahead.
here. I
Okay.
did this part.
Okay, yes, please, I've been talking one.
So
It is.
I don't want to get ahead of you here.
Not as
but
bad as we
I'll-
thought.
Tell me if you
What's there?
talk about this, but those fiber lines that are going to those pedestals,
To any standard.
are they available to a third party?
Yes.
Like old phone lines?
Yeah, there's, okay, so in certain circumstances, right, and this is where it gets a little dicey, right? You can't just say yes for everything. But in certain circumstances, the communication companies are always leasing, you know, infrastructure and fiber ducts, whatever it might be, from each other. All that's standard practice, right? And it's actually required by law that they do some of that. So they charge for it. I mean, it's there, you have to pay for it, but it generally is available. So when you see fiber lines put in, unless it's really old fiber, where the cost per strand was really high. Nowadays, it's the excavation that costs the money. The cable itself is fairly inexpensive in relation to the excavation cost. And strand count is no longer, until you get into really high strand counts, you know, strand count isn't a cost prohibitive thing anymore either. So what you find out in those areas is an awful lot of fiber optic cable, a lot of fiber strands in these routes. And a lot of that is unused and therefore available for a lease. And that's why they do that, because they know that that might be valuable someday. We're going to spend the money to put it in the ground. We're going to architect it a certain way and put enough capacity in there so we don't have to come back and dig it up again in a couple of years, right? So yes, they're in most cases, there's capacity for leasing and from different companies. So you're up on it.
Taking back to something I can use.
Oh. How about this?
I love technology, but you know,
We jump way ahead.
you jump way ahead. Keep going, keep going, keep going. All right.
There you go.
So we may sound like we're casual and willy-nilly about what we're doing at times, but we really aren't. We have some real strong principles. When Kyle decided to found this company, it was, are we going to do this if we can make things better? I'm not just going to become part of the problem. If I'm going to be part of the problem, keep the old job he had. Company, go out at 2:00 in the morning and fix things or install things. But so we came up with this list of things that we are judging things and thinking about as we do recommendations. So he already said if it's not reliable, it's not valuable. I mean, it's essential. We aren't going to recommend anything that we don't score against reliability. We will tell you, we suggest X, Y, or Z. Reliability isn't as good as the next thing, but we'll make sure you know what you're getting before, as we recommend things.
Yeah, we have to always balance I have nothing now. So anything right now is better than nothing, but that's that kicking in the can, right? So if it costs this much more to get it better, then you have to weigh that out and say, okay, should we spend an extra 2% to get it so that it's not going to be a problem in 5 years, right?
So Kyle talked about the longevity already. You just can't keep doing things as we have in the past. He talked about the capacity, that everything around it has to be able to serve what you're doing. We were working with a community on the other side of the state, and they were ready to go. And Kyle said, unless CenturyLink, I think it was, upgrades that they have coming through this area, you can spend all the money you want and you're not going to get better speed. It just isn't there in some of the old areas that they did it. So then speed is what everybody is concerned about. And when we look at speed, we consider it in real world practical use. It's none of this up to language that it's like, okay, when you get here with the trees and the hills, what is the real speed of what people can expect? And then I mentioned a little bit earlier about accountability. We think about past performance. We think about what is around now and what, how well it's taken care of, and looking at our recommendations, because if things aren't good enough, then that's part of the recommendation to make things improve.
I have one more note on the principles thing. It's not on here, not because it's not important, but we're approaching this from a real technical perspective, but there's also a real economic perspective from the end user, right? So we wouldn't recommend you put in, a whole bunch of money into fiber optic system that costs $700 a month, right? That's just not reasonable. And the FCC does have programs for, people that can't afford to do it, but there's a big gap between where that stops and where the average homeowner starts. And so we're looking to find and have you partner with ISPs that are going to be able to deliver packages that meet market demand and also meet market price expectations, right? So that's competitively priced. So the pricing is in here, but for the purpose of this meeting, we were just focusing on the technical pieces, right? So just so you know, we're aware
Hear
of
about money.
Yes, we're aware of the pricing. So
Okay, so the top line recommendations, Kyle already mentioned where there is, we call it pond ready. That's the lowest hanging fruit, and our recommendation would be those red and purple areas that have the pond nearby. Let's work with the ISP to get the equipment in the area that needs to be there, and then let's hook it up. The way to save money doing that, or to get more value for the money we're spending, is all the property that needs to be excavated, the individual's property. The ISP doesn't have to do that part. The county could hire and bid out a utility contractor to do that as part of your grant program. Or Mr. Do It Himself here said, driving around, he's like, there are so many people with the equipment to do this already. He goes, I wouldn't want anybody ripping up my lawn. So he wants to make an instructional video for people to do it themselves, because it's not that hard if you have the specifications and you're a do-it-yourself kind of person.
And again, one of the reasons why we might look at splitting that up to see if there's an economic value there is because the drop cables actually end up being up to 50% of the total excavation required for this stuff. And that's why they're trying to push that off onto the homeowner to do. But we have certain specifications that we want people to follow. So if the county did something like that, you'd have a little bit more control over future-proofing it as well. So we want to see things in conduit, for example, so that when the fiber cable is damaged or you have to upgrade it to the next version of whatever, you pull it out and put it back in without having to dig again. Because again, we talked about excavation being the most expensive part. So let's dig once and spend, that little bit extra to get it to a state of reliability and longevity.
He already mentioned dig once. Work, and one of the things we were going to talk to Leslie about is having some online community meetings or something. So with the townships and the cities, so that anything that is being done in their communities where there's an open trench, road projects and everything, put in this conduit. And so, again, we don't have to dig when, even if it's 5 years down the road that area may get its service. Anytime there's something open, put in some conduit. Wireless internet, the wireless internet providers, there's a lot of them interested in serving this area. And one of the things we're going to recommend is, again, and this is for the reliability and the longevity part of it, we have some recommendations on how that should be done. It's using some of the newer technology, but it would provide you more reliability than what you're experiencing now.
And that's that longevity, time-weighted piece we look at and say, okay, where does that fall in?
So you want to talk about the cellular home internet one? Because
yeah, we talked a little bit about it. There are areas where, like, very similar to what you alluded to, Commissioner, where you're on your property, you're close to structure, but you're not getting the service and you don't have wireline service. So we found that around some of the fringes of the populated areas are DSL services that don't, you just don't have it. One area that one of the things that I don't know if people know, so it might be like a community informational thing, but those folks might be able to put antennas on their home, pointed at the cellular towers, and buy a cellular package of some sort to provide that as their modem service. And it just, that's fairly spotty where that might work, but it is something where you might be able to catch a few more people that if you can't get to them with wireline service, that would be a gap fill until the wireline service gets there. And with the 5G stuff coming up, if you have that antenna and you can see the tower and you can point it at it, you can get the bandwidth off of it. So.
And this isn't something where we would say that counties should subsidize it. It's just more of recommending. I hope you didn't say that when you were talking.
Do we look at that as a gap filler, more or less?
That's more of a, oh, by the way, if you're in these areas, you may want to consider
until we can get
something we discovered. Yeah, right.
So Leslie was insistent that you need a project list. So the yellow broken line, the con-ready stuff, again, that's what we should finalize and get that going. Finalize the grant program. We recommended in that grant program things to hold people accountable, and we were recommending to you that you set the standards pretty high for what the applications can be. It's like, you're not gonna, no, you have to have things that can be scalable and done in a certain way. So it protects the longevity of it. Fix the bottlenecks so you don't have the same problems happening. The public safety grant we talked about, and the dig once policy, the conversations with the townships and the cities and the school districts and such, and then to finalize the plans. It's kind of it's going to take a while to finalize those red and areas to get that ready, but the other things start happening fairly quickly. Something left my brain, but.
And what we mean by the red and purple areas is that you're gonna have to adopt more of a multi-decade or multi-year strategy on
Not
that.
decade.
Yeah, it depends on how much money they throw at it, but yeah, it's,
We're gonna find that money.
but yeah, there's we're gonna bring it to you in actionable steps, so it can be like basically not engineered ready, but you'll know where to start prioritizing and putting certain funds, and you can start budgeting for different things. So when opportunities do present themselves, you can go into those areas.
And we can start applying for the grants with the community and with, as I said, with the healthcare providers, the money that's in the federal funds that are there for telemedicine and stuff. There's no reason we can't talk to them about how to combine this to get the help to the individual people. So now you can ask me.
Any more questions?
Yeah, I got.
Do we take your whole meeting?
If you allow me first. I'm interested in the fiber that's already in the ground. If existing ISP said, you know, if we don't have to lay 20 miles of fiber in Pine City Township and we only have to take off from one of those D-slam boxes, we could, and we got some grant money, we could make this thing work. But it seems like there's a reluctance for one ISP not to own the infrastructure all the way from their CEO to the guy's house. So
Yeah.
how do we get past that?
Well, one of the things that we're doing as a company is bridging that gap with, and we consider it like choice. We want people to have market choice, because today, let's say you have an internet service provider today that's doing a really good job. They're providing your needs very well. They get bought, and in a couple of years, the company's policy is to rake the profits and not do any maintenance and things like that. And then it deteriorates, and you're stuck with this person that has a geographic monopoly on your area. We're doing another part of Hometown Fiber is we're putting in infrastructure in key areas where this model works. And we tie to those broadband links that you're talking about. And we bring in multiple internet providers to provide service to the homes. And it's a little tricky to do that, but we found that for every ISP that's, we call them incumbents, you know, they're there, they have the monopoly on the land. You're kind of stuck with that one provider today. Those folks put up the resistance a little bit for somebody else providing services. But we have 90 some ISPs in the state of Minnesota, and we are working with people at the FCC on a weekly basis, and we're working with people all over the country, different ISPs, both wired and wireless, that want to come in and provide services on our networks. So the choice thing is starting to get quite a bit of traction because the market demand is there for it. People want that choice. And as long as you're building something, you might as well dig it once and do it in a way that you can share it. You know,
It seems to me that fiber line that goes by my road was put in by CenturyLink, and they got CAF money. So they got federal public dollars to do it. And it seems to me it's no different than a public road, except that the federal government gave these private companies to build that road. Now they're charging this exorbitant toll to run down that road. If there is a way to undo some of that.
But it's not a matter of undoing, because there are some rules that state that they have to provide access to different things. But we have a very similar view, not because it was federally funded, but just from a practical perspective. Because the internet has now sort of moved up to critical infrastructure, and maybe coming into COVID, we were already feeling some pressure, and it was just, a nuisance. During the pandemic here now, we're in full blown problem. And so when you look at architecting something as critical infrastructure, it's a different topology and a different hierarchy than what you would build with the systems you're architecting before, right? So we look at it like, if you're going to architect it as critical infrastructure, then you have to treat it like a roadway where anybody can use it. Otherwise, it doesn't make a lot of sense. You're just kind of perpetuating the problem. So in some of these areas where that applies, we will have those recommendations for you on where to consider doing that. A lot of that has to start with those local communities, right? The township or the town. They need to be involved in that, because we go in and we can directly connect all of their water, wastewater, public safety, fire departments, all that. We connect all that directly. So it's very reliable and there as part of the project, instead of them just getting whatever is, whatever the architect of the ISP gave them. So, yeah, the securing of those water, wastewater, and other critical infrastructures, power, things like that is also very important to look at when you're architecting a new design.
I wonder if the PowerPoint is done, if you want to stop sharing.
Sure.
It just makes the remote a little.
Yeah.
Does anybody have questions here?
I got,
Yeah,
so
Josh.
we've been working real close with a local electrical cooperative
Mhm.
that is very gonna forge ahead hopefully here. So there's obviously some, we can share some stuff with them to try to get some stuff on the ground and kind of go from there. And like you said, having multiple ISPs is obviously really good. But I know these guys are looking at putting everything, to the home of all their electrical, suppliers. Now, one thing that it seems like we're not quite there, but we're there, as far as how critical, like you said, critical it is.
Right.
And we just need to decide we got to make that step. The other thing I've heard, and I know you guys are working on it, is money, and what kind of money is it going to take? And I really think I'd like to see from the ISPs what they need to get their ROI, because I don't think it's as bad as we think. We're not building it out. We're not putting it in. They just have a gap. Like we gap finance a lot of other stuff. They just have this gap. And what is that gap? But to try to get them to give that to you, they just, it's hard.
In part of this proposal, we reached out to get maps and different things from ISPs, because it would have made our job a little bit easier, and we could use that information to verify what we found in the field. And, we knew what the answer was going to be. But yeah, rightfully so. They're in the business to compete. They're competing with each other. So they don't necessarily want to make all this publicly available either. So, but when they come for subsidy, or when you incentivize certain areas or certain priorities or subsidize or incentivize, then that's a different animal. Then there's an opportunity to engage and have a discussion. So.
Terry, you got any questions?
No.
Matt?
No.
JJ, you got any questions? I'm gonna ask some of the other people that are on the call if you want to unmute yourself. But I think that's okay to ask them to. I know some of these people that are on the call have been on our broadband task force and are probably more knowledgeable than many of us.
You should have a good one.
Bill, do you have any comments or questions?
Hi, this is Bill Coleman, and I guess I'm really interested in the requirements about requiring CenturyLink to provide access to their networks. I'm not familiar with that ability, that power to do that?
Yeah, that was a part of the 1996 Telecommunications Act, where ISPs have to be let into their central offices. They have to be let in and be allowed to lease their services at market rate. They list that market rate on their internet. You on their site, you can go look at it. It's all spelled out because they're a regulated carrier. So that's where that comes from.
Are you aware of where that's been forced? Where somebody's being able to locate in a D-SLAM, co-locate in a D-SLAM?
Co-locate. I didn't understand the question. Where it's been forced?
Well, yeah. I mean, so that, and I'm just curious. So your recommendation really is to build from the D-SLAMs to the homes, right? Isn't that what I'm hearing?
Well, there's areas where you have existing pond-ready services that are using those D-SLAM areas for power, and you could the whole architecture is to set the pond splitting and the switchgear right there, and then follow the same topology that they use for the twisted pair.
Yeah.
So
my question is,
we're going with there, but the other part, what they were talking about here is, could a third-party provider set up at a D-SLAM? And that is technically possible. Sure, you can do that, but they would also need to have some sort of switchgear back at the central office and lease those lines. You know what I mean? Because you can't just show up at a D-SLAM and say, I'm an ISP now. You know, it doesn't quite work that way. But if the capacity is there, they do need to let you in and lease those lines.
okay, I'm just not familiar with that happening anywhere in Minnesota.
It happens every CO all over the state. Those leases are happening. Now, whether they're taking that and applying it out to a D-SLAM, there hasn't really been a huge financial incentive for somebody to do that yet. But legally and technically and by every measure of the law, that is very easy to do.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Josh touched on it, but you know, I think one elephant in the county is East Central Energy's sudden transformation, you might speak, and maybe it's not sudden to them, but to us, it's a 180-degree pivot from what they've told us in the past. And so I'm excited. I would be very, very excited if they were here today and said, well, we're going to take this project on. Come hell or high water, we got engineers working on it right now. We're moving forward.
Right.
But they're not at that point yet.
That takes a long time to get there.
So my fear is if we say, well, let's just wait for them, we could be here a year from now having the same conversation and not move the needle at all. My other fear is we move forward and we build out, but if I listen to you, that's not a bad position to be in, because then the person that's sitting in their business or their home has two choices instead of zero choices, which for the ISPs might not be what they want, but for the customer, it's a good thing.
One thing about working with electric utilities, I'm going to go a little bit on a limb here, so hopefully I don't get too much hot water, but you know, they're deep-seated in the communities. They've got a lot of infrastructure, a lot of investment in the communities. And they're very the ones we've worked with in the past that are doing broadband, they're very customer service oriented, and they already have all the linemen, the trucks, the infrastructure. You know, they have to add a little bit more to that, but it's not like they have to reinvent the whole wheel, right? There's a lot of advantages for a regional cooperative to look at this. When, as your representatives, you know, if that starts moving forward, there are a few things that we want to look at to protect your interests and coordinate what they're doing with what you're doing, right?
You're saying the right words, no.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Anyway.
I mean, I gotta be careful not to get into too much hot water with the cooperatives, because I really like what they do. I like their business model, but there are some opportunities or some, areas to be concerned, but really just looking for those opportunities to complement instead of duplicate, right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Okay. I said that fairly generically, but
I'm terrifically excited that they have come to the conclusion they've come to.
Yeah.
But they have a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
To get to the point where they're going to put the first strand of fiber in the ground somewhere.
And the work that we saw that they had done already, at least the parts that we could observe, it was very well done. It wasn't quickly put together or just thrown in. It was done with care, concern, and meticulous construction practices. So you get a feel for how reliable something would be. A lot of the stuff we find out in the easements are just, fast and cheap at all costs, and you can tell we construct those things. So we know what we're looking at. But in the case of your municipal power, they've done a really good job with what they've built so far.
But we have a lot of area that's not covered by them too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think of some of the areas that we have that are your red and purple, they're not essential energy. And so to be able to, we've got so many people that need help.
We are very committed to do this countywide. We are not interested in just doing the stuff around Steve's house or Terry's house. That is not in our plan at all. Just so people know, we are committed to get to the last house in Pine County.
Yeah, and these interactive maps that we've created, we hope will be a good tool to start being able to quickly deduce where you want to start prioritizing that effort. And in the collaborative piece, there's other entities in your county besides power. You have the Mille Band that has a lot of interest and a lot of infrastructure that's out there. We actually built some for them way back in 2010. But there's opportunities there too.
And they are on the call today too.
Yeah. Beth had to drop off.
Oh, Beth had to drop off.
Oh, that's too bad. Well, anyway, but they do have some fiber optic infrastructure and some things in key areas that would be helpful to that public safety side. And there's some collaborative pieces that can complement each other if there's some way to put a joint venture together like that. And there's other opportunities like that we saw and observed, and we'll disclose that in the full report. So. Oh, what does it say? Entered at 1.1 Starlink.
What's the question?
They want to know about Starlink in the red zones
In New Mexico.
And Starlink is it's an evolving technology. That's Elon Musk's broadband thing. We evaluated Starlink pretty carefully before we launched Hometown Fiber, because why would we go against something like that? And what we concluded is that it is a phenomenal service, right? But it does have technical limits just like everything else. And when you start to apply cruise ships, trains, cars, trucks, aircraft, military, tanks, people, all of that, anything that can't be tethered is going to be gravitating to some degree towards Starlink. That network is going to be phenomenal for those applications. And then to the question here, in the areas that are left behind that we can't get to in a reasonable period of time, Starlink can be an option for them. There are what's called RDOF. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that term, but the FCC has RDOF areas. There are sections of your county that Starlink has already received the money for those areas. So they sort of tied that ground up with federal funding. So there's some of that here already for them.
So that would be another question. we have large areas of Pine County that LT,
LTD.
it has RDOF contract or whatever.
Yep.
So how do we work around that, with it, through it?
So I'm a technical person, really technical.
Oh, you got company.
Eileen's
Phone a
the,
friend.
I'm phoning
So
this.
I've been following this because it's, so you have SCI broadband had an RDOF area.
Right.
And they were awarded. I mean, there is this
Yep.
final, they're awarded.
Yep.
I'm gonna check again with the broadband office for the state, but in conversations that I've been on calls with Senator Klobuchar and Tina Smith, and I don't know if they have the letter from the FCC or if it's just an understanding right now that until someone has received that final go ahead like SCI did, those other RDOF areas are still
Up for grabs.
up for grabs, or you're able to invest money in those areas until that final award is given. So I'm hoping that is still the case, but it was, we had talked about it, and maybe Bill knows this from the broadband meetings, but it's a huge concern in so many areas. But if they haven't been awarded, and Bill just back on, am I right?
Yeah, that's
Bill?
my understanding as well.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Bill.
So that's how.
So how do we go about getting them not awarded? Let's be real.
Well, talk to the two senators.
Okay.
I don't know if it's possible, but I know LeSueur County is facing the same thing. They're like shovel ready to go, and they were shut down by we call it, they got RDOF. The other thing that Leslie and I came up with was on the grant side, you can't spend federal money and give it to an ISP if they're getting federal money.
Right.
But if it's COVID, you can give it to the homeowner. So you can give grants to residents that wouldn't run afoul of, because you wouldn't be giving it to an ISP. So
That would be like.
I don't know if I should have said that out loud here, but.
What you were talking about.
But
You're right.
I guess I just said it out loud. I have it in the report, but.
You're pretty away from the mic, I don't know.
I thought that was just kind of a great idea that she's like, hey, they're all affected by COVID-19. I can set up a grant program for the property owners. So.
Right.
Yeah, and from a technical perspective, we talked about those drop cables being fairly expensive overall to get in. So we're trying to figure out ways to help people get the service that's there, when it's there. So.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I have an RDOF related
Yeah.
question maybe, and I'm maybe not understanding something. But if somebody was awarded RDOF funds to construct broadband in Pine County, we would not, as a practical matter, likely find somebody who was going to try to beat them into the area, right? So I'm not sure what the suggestion.
Well, and maybe Bill can back me up on this or us on this, but one of the things that was, to your point, was the initial RDOF award was somewhat shocking to us. I'm sure Blandon as well, because it really it tied up a whole bunch of ground. And we looked at it as like a land grab, like I'm going to monopolize this land. And then they put a 10-year shelf on it, like you don't really have to do anything for 10 years. And that really threw a wrench for the last, beginning stages of this until there's been some pushback. Bill, is that accurate? Do you view it that way as well?
Yeah, I think they have locked up a lot of this area now, waiting for the RDOF to be approved. It's been almost a year now since that auction ended, and they've been waiting there's there's probably a handful of these very large awardees that many people would say are going to struggle to accomplish what they bid. So LTD was awarded almost $1 billion across the country, And there's some feeling that they're going to have to raise $3 to $4 billion more to be able to build out what they've committed to. And so that's really the question is, can they actually do that? And that's what the FCC is waiting on. And I think the FCC is probably waiting on their 5th commissioner to make any kind of big policy decisions about canceling those prospective awardees. Staff might be a little afraid to make those big decisions without a full commission. So it's really kind of a black box right now. We don't really know what's going on there. But I think keeping in touch with your US senators and congressional members about this and letting them know your concerns would be important.
And I think as far as Pine County administrator, I think the only award to proceed with construction that we're aware of is the SCI broadband grant. The rest of them are still.
Not understanding the value of clarification that says you can build in an area that has RDOF until that final approval. Because in practical terms, nobody's really going to want to go into that area.
Yeah, it de-incentivizes those areas, and unfortunately, they can wait 10, according to the current rule, they can wait up to 10 years.
And then from our perspective, if there's federal grant money programmed for Pine County, our goal should be to hasten the project versus try to find somebody else to do that same project with non-federal money.
Right.
I mean, I think that's a non-starter.
Yeah.
Practical term.
I think the only thing I would keep in mind, as part of what we're recommending is to make sure that it's not so monopolistic and so rigid that it hurts your community in the long haul. So just take a review of that before you sign anything. A lot of these folks that have got RDOF awards are cold calling and having Zoom meetings and calling into these communities. And we get brought in, much like Bill is in this meeting, he's an active participant. We get brought in, and what they're asking the communities to do is sign a memorandum of understanding to lock up the ground no matter what, right? They want to lock the ground up, even if they have no intentions of building that out, because it stops competition from coming in that would otherwise build it. So it can be a little dynamic, but I think you have to take it on a area by area basis. If you're the county, just to your point,
What basis would the county have to lock up ground with any provider?
No, they're locking the ground up, and then they're asking these
LTE wants us to sign something that says we're committed with you guys because you're going to get this RDOF money. So then any of these other projects, the way I understand it, nobody would say we wouldn't then be able to award them any state or federal grant to any other person in that, if that's what I understand.
Yeah, that's just the practice that's been happening with not all of the people that are doing that, but we've been involved in a couple meetings where that's been the case. So, and I just think any opportunity to bring broadband out is better than nothing, right? I mean, that's the goal, is to get something versus nothing, but you have to be a little bit future minded too, and make sure that it is right, a good fit for the community and right for your county. So.
Leslie, do you have something to say? Yep.
At the end of all this, what I'm kind of looking for, thank you for the feedback, but we're working with Blendon right now as a Blendon broadband community, and there's some opportunity to apply for grant funds. And I'm not asking for your permission, just kind of trying to feel out the temperature in the room for this. I see two potential projects coming out of this presentation. One is figuring out how to use those ponds, and if I'm speaking in the right technical terms, and get those, fiber lines. The beautiful part about this project is that they did it in GIS and right down to the property. So we'll be able to do a mailing list out to people that says, are you interested? Let's run some cost estimates with Hometown Fiber's help. Here's what it'll cost. Maybe we put out an RFP, find a utility provider that can dig in the trenches, work with Hometown Fiber for people that want to do it themselves, rent a trencher from Best Rentals and do it, down their own driveway. figuring out how to help a few hundred households, we're imagining. I know they haven't worked through the entire county yet, but you've made it about 2/3 of the way through. I think that's kind of like a nice low hanging fruit, quick and easy. We can have a win, and that gets people the best type of service that they can get, period. And then a second would be, I think you guys have identified infrastructure upgrades that need to happen, or areas where if this was fixed, it would serve these 50 households better. And start that being kind of our priority for some of these grant funds that could be coming down the pipeline, as to not step on toes for the newer stuff coming in. I don't see a lot of people getting the entire county in the next couple of years. No, probably not. But if we can start fixing some of these problems, I think it'll feel good. It'll be good. People will be happier. I'll be honest, I'm signed up for Starlink to probably come to my house in February, because I have no idea where I sit in the county, if I'm close to a pond or not, because they haven't gotten down to my part of the county. But I can say that it'd be nice to hear from people like, yeah, I saw them put fiber in my ditch. I know my neighbors have good service. Now I do, that equity piece. So those are kind of two things that I've been kind of thinking of doing just in the next few months, just to kind of keep the ball bouncing down the road, not kicking the can, bouncing the ball.
So that, the first project about
Yeah.
pound of fiber, I can see myself doing that, or finding a friend who owns an underground construction company and say, hey, you can buy interduct for $1.15 a foot. Let's buy a roll and take it from the ditch by next to that pedestal and take it to my house, and buying some fiber from him and blowing it through there. We get to that point, then what do we do?
Yeah, that's you.
We were thinking more along just getting the duct in, because then the ISP will come in and hook it right up.
So then if we called up CenturyLink and said, I got some interduct going from 2 feet away from your pedestal to the outside of my house, there, I put a box there. Can you come out and pull fiber through that and hook me up? And what are you gonna charge me a month? What would they say?
Well,
Tried that yet?
well, yeah, we've had a lot of, they're interested in this, because CenturyLink's an interesting animal to work with, but they have this out there. They'll get the service to you, they will. But it depends on a couple things. They're going to want to have some input on what is built, right?
Okay.
You got to use this duct, you got to use these things, and that's reasonable for them.
Yep.
What's that? I think the charge might come in if they get out there and they're unable to pull it, or there's some reason why it wasn't installed correctly, or somebody can start to see maybe some finger pointing there a little bit.
Yep.
But other than that, I think that it's a very reasonable.
But these guys are around, they live in our communities that do that under contract for Midco, FCI. Terry had a contractor out that buried electric cable because she got a hold of it. But those guys are around, we talked to them.
Well, we were driving around the county, and a lot of industrial areas, a lot of agriculture areas, a lot of heavy equipment. And it hit me like, as I was driving on the county roads, I'm like, what? If I have that in my backyard, I'll do it myself and save $2,600, right?
So I talked to a lady this last fall when they were doing the Midco stuff. She actually lives in Graston, and she's the crew foreman on an underground directional boring crew.
Mm-hmm.
Said, man, you got to be one of the only women in the state. She said, I probably am. That I'm a foreman on this crew.
Yeah.
But she lives in Graston.
Yeah.
And they just hire on with whoever hires them.
Yeah.
But then if my follow-up to that would be, what if 3 years from now, East Central Energy plows fiber down the road, and you say, I like those guys better, and I own the interduct. Can we call them up and say, hey, we want to have you connect to us.
That was our Hometown Fiber's inception started with that premise. How do we get people choice? Because without choice, you can't have competitive marketplace and you can't have reliability and, you know, without that competition, how do you get there? So all of our recommendations are waiting on something similar to that philosophical view. So yes, they can do that.
So, I have a question. I don't understand this. So if SCI Cable has a box up there. And I can call some other company and say, connect not SCI Cable to their stuff?
Well, not right now. I mean, you'd have to develop that area. Yeah. You know,
Let's just say it's there and there's that box up there. I could call up a different company and they can tie into SCI Cable stuff?
not today.
Okay.
Those companies would need to lease that line and provide the service for you.
So someday that's gonna be that way?
It's possible to do today, but
How's that? Because it's a public utility or public dollars put it in or what?
it's just it's part of the 96 Telecommunication Act, and it's not feasible for a lot of these companies to do that without subsidy though, because the map doesn't work for them to do that. Like to have 5 different providers in front of your house, that's not feasible with 5 different pieces of infrastructure or pieces, you know. So what we're saying is, if you want to build a whole system like that, you put it in as a public entity. It's one infrastructure, and then multiple people can lease lines on it.
So I think a lot of our county is CenturyLink, or at least in my area, I think a lot of us are CenturyLink. And when I contacted them, because I moved across the street, they cut my service down. And when I contacted them to see if they'd be willing to work with our county with this broadband fund and everything, they told me probably not. So they told you that they would be interested because they told us that we're too rural, we're too far apart, and they did not think that they would be willing to come.
Right. Yeah, you have to talk to the right people, right?
But I had them.
It's a big organization with a lot of different aspects to it, so.
Yeah. Well, they had just said, and I think it's kind of the same feeling that we've been getting from LTD, is that they have so many people coming to them that want service. And LTD, what they did for the RDOF funds is huge. I mean, they've got so many different areas that they're working in. And then they had said to us, if you're willing to sign up some of your other areas with us, we'll come to you first, or we'll put you towards the head of the line. But I think CenturyLink was kind of the same way. There's so many people that have money now that want this, that we're going to be picky and choosy as to who we're going to take.
That is true. That is true. And there's no reason that they're under any obligation to say yes, right? They don't have to say yes.
Right.
I think if you look around the state of Minnesota, at least, and you look at the areas that are served by independent phone companies who are governed by a board of directors who are people just like us that live in those communities, they have sat around a boardroom table and said to their management team, we are going to invest because we own this stuff. We're going to make this work for our customers because they're already our customers. And that's what is exciting to me about an electric co-op getting into the business. Because if you look at what they've done, at least in the state of Minnesota, the ones that have forged ahead have done exactly the same thing. They've done it because they're there. They've been there for 100 years or 70 years already. They're going to be there another 70 years. Their lineman lives right down the road. They're, the board of directors is, Roseau Co-op just started on a project, a couple of years ago. I think they're doing it in segments, but eventually they'll get to their whole system.
Yeah, and it's also advantageous for the other critical infrastructure that they operate, which is power.
Right.
And if they can connect their SCADA systems and all their comm together with a fiber network that also serves the public, but they have their private uses on it, that just shores up all of that. So it's beneficial in multiple ways. Yeah.
Well, appreciate what you've done so far. And I think Leslie, are you looking for action from this board to say, let's go ahead with some of these ideas to Is that what we need to do, or what do we need to do at this point?
This is just informational, and then you've got more work to do you said you haven't been down to Leslie's house yet.
I think if there were anything you heard that was not something you're interested in, sharing that thought would be good. But otherwise, I think there's, clear consensus that broadband is important. The county's going to continue to work towards solutions.
I like the part about having some criteria attached to, because we hear from a lot of people bend our ear about, we could get you into this for a lot cheaper and, it works, and we know a lot of things. But, it's like that famous old Fram oil commercial, you can pay me now or pay me later, buy quality stuff and it lasts, it'll keep working. Supposed to say Napa filter, I know.
Thank you so much for everything you've already done.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Gotten a lot accomplished.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Leslie. Let's see. We will move on to the appointment of the Extension Committee. We got a recommendation for Ruth Carlson from District 5 for a 1-year appointment, or no, 2-year appointment, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I will move that, Mr. Chair.
I will second that. She's going to be excellent.
Yes.
We got a motion by Ludwig, second by Lovegren to appoint Ruth Carlson to the Extension Committee. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Just in your comment, you had said 2-year. It's a 3-year term. All of 2022, 23, and 24.
Yeah.
No, I was just doing the subtraction. Sorry, 3-year. Good catch there, David. If no,
I don't know.
We'll call the motion, and Debbie, you'll call the roll.
District 3, Commissioner Lovegren.
Aye.
District 4, Commissioner Waldham.
Yes.
District 5, Commissioner Ludwig.
Aye.
District 1, Chair Holland.
Yes,
District 2, Commissioner Moore.
Aye.
Thank you.
thank you. Commissioner updates. Let's see, we had a rescheduled Mille Lacs Band, East Central Regional Library Board.
Getting the year set up and the committee set up, and talking about Sandstone, I think their goal is to be, the new library's goal is to be open by September.
Oh, this year?
Yeah, yep. So that's pretty exciting. They've been working on that. That was about the gist.
You want to do the Chemical Health Coalition also?
No, because I took down my Christmas tree and looked at the clock and I was late. I'm sorry.
We both missed it.
Okay. Public safety was canceled, and the rest of the stuff we were committee of the whole meetings, I believe, last week, so.
I had a shack meeting.
Oh, yes, you did.
I did. And so it was kind of funny at the very end. She said, so what did you all get out of this? And I said, I'm so excited, because normally I would just go back and we talked about the COVID virus. And this time I have a whole page full of notes. So I was like, ooh. So one of the things that they're looking at is, they said that with the shortage of staff and overworked employees and people on burnout, they're looking at public health going a whole different direction. And so one of the things that they're going to be talking about is what direction we see it going in, and setting up some new guidelines for what's going to be, like Josh has been saying, we're going to have to maybe start cutting services. So it's going to be interesting to see where that's going to end up going. The other thing that they had talked about, which was interesting because it was right after our meeting that we had, with the Omicron virus, that the Mayo, the Wednesday after Christmas, started doing 5,000 tests a day, which I think is extremely crazy, but I don't know if that's the Mayo's all throughout the state, because they have so many different clinics, or if it was just the Rochester Mayo. I'm really not sure on that one, but I thought that was kind of interesting. And then there's a grant that's out. There's the federal government gave a lot of money to to help. It's like $6 million in the state of Minnesota for public health. And so they're looking at an innovative program. It's the infrastructure fund. And we have the ability to apply for some of that money, but you have to come up with you have to do an application and figure out a program that you're going to do with your county to utilize that fund that's going to work towards public health. And I've reached out to Sam and to Becky, and because it's a really short process, you have to do it really fast. They're not sure if they're going to be able to do that, but because it's a really short grant, so they're working on that. And then I did say, you know, when you get there, would you be willing to come and talk to the board about that and your program and what you're thinking? So, yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else have any meetings?
And one more.
Oh,
The Highway 23 Coalition.
oh, yes.
So it was interesting. Right now, they're trying to figure out who can help them write applications, because like I would not be a good road application person, and neither would 99.9% of the people on the board. So what they're wondering is if highway engineers in the area that they're looking at doing the road projects on, if they would be willing to step up and help them write those applications for grants so that we can get that money to go towards those funds. One of the big ones that they're talking about is down from Pipestone to Russell, and they just want to do an overlay with concrete and do some off-ramp exchanges. The other one that we did get on there is from Foley to Malacca to do a project and see if it's worth what it is. The one guy had said that there's been like 4 accidents or 4 deaths in that corridor recently. And so they're saying that you know, with the deaths on there, that it would be equitable to go to 4 lanes. But as of right now, they don't know if it would be, so they'll do the study on that. So that's kind of what that was about.
Where are they folks, the whole length of 23? Do they?
No.
Where's their strongest
It's-
focus right now?
It's coming from down south. Is it 94 that runs 20?
Yep.
It goes down to 94?
Yeah,
So
it
it'd be
comes in
20.
right by St. Cloud,
No, all the way down to.
way down to 90.
Yeah, it'd be.
Yeah, 90.
90.
Okay. So it'd be going from there all the way up to the 23 exit.
I know that, but I mean, where are they
Yeah.
putting their focus?
I think
How
a
far
lot
have
of
they
it
made
is-
in the last 3 years.
They're working more down south. Yeah, they're not working as much up
Both
here.
directions from St. Cloud, they've made major improvements.
Yeah.
So St. Cloud is the hub where they were starting from, it's going kind of southwest.
Well,
northeast.
if you go further southwest, they've done they haven't made them 4 lanes all the way, but they, you know, bypass Painesville. We drive that road quite often, not quite often, but often enough to see.
You take 23 down to 90, you got some weird moves in there.
Yeah.
You did the last time.
They've done a lot of those improvements around those towns.
Had so many grain trucks and
A lot of
equipment on the roads that it was nuts.
passing lane type things, widened shoulders. But Terry, I'm sure the people know that, but you know, it's probably encompasses 4 or 5 MnDOT districts.
Yeah.
And that's part of the problem is that they're multi-jurisdictional, but to get the attention of those MnDOT districts is really critical.
When they said that the MnDOT districts are saying that we're getting in their way. So
Well-
when we start putting projects, you know, it'd be like us telling Mark, this is the way I thought of it. Us telling Mark, no, I don't want you to do your road projects. I want you to do these road projects.
Yeah.
And so it's taking what they've already figured out was essential and saying, no, we want this put ahead of it. So they're kind of pushing back a little bit and saying, you know, lay low a little bit, but
But I think I'm the representative
Right.
to our MnDOT District 1, and I will certainly bring up that we pushed for Highway 70 improvements and it took a few years, but you know, we finally got them down here, got them on a bus tour and you know, you can move the needle.
right. And that's what they were saying too. Yeah. Yep. They want more specifics, more specific areas with the goals. Bolton and Mink was there and they were saying, you can't just go in there and say, I want this road done. You have to have what your goals are. You know, we want less deaths. We want, whatever. And so that's the other thing is they said, we really need to start thinking about what those goals are and the specifics of why, so that we can get those projects done.
So it's, so we be planning growth and development and that, all that, or just public?
Right, that was a big part too. Yep.
Anybody else? I just have one thing, and it's not really in the role of the commissioner, but I think we need to be aware of the things that happen around us. We lost a good colleague from Kennebec County a few weeks ago, Gene Anderson. I got word last week that Mike Robinson from Chisago County, who represents the Rush City area, is on hospice. I go, how can he be in hospice? I just talked to him. Josh and he was just in Josh's store a week ago, and he's full of cancer.
Yeah, it's cancer.
He's not gonna go through anything to let nature take its course. He's not doing well at all. And then the other day, I went to the wake. Jeremy Cummings, who was a Pine County resident, worked at our solid waste facility in Pine City. And I think of those things that make Pine County good. And Jeremy really set the tone at that recycling center for treating people with dignity and teaching them and sticking up for people. And he was very good at what he did. And
Heard a lot of compliments and stories about the interactions with him there.
yeah, he was just a good person.
Yes.
And we're gonna miss him. And so I think a moment of silence for Jeremy. Think of his wife. They're 50 years old. I remember them when they were in school, and she's standing there with 2 teenage kids, kind of alone in this world now. So just a moment of silence before we adjourn. Thank you. Anything else that we need to bring up? I'll be on the road for a few days, and I'll be calling in for the next couple of meetings. So not going as far as JJ, but I am going.
Is that a sweater you have on, JJ?
Travel safe. No, just t-shirt.
Okay.
Anyway, I will declare. Thanks for dialing in, JJ.
See you, JJ.
Yep. Thank you, everybody.
Meeting adjourned.